Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar from Real Story Group. Really excited about today's topic, which is your journey from DAM to omnichannel content management. We have our Managing Director and Lead DAM Analyst, Jarrod Gingras, on the line with us today, who's going to be taking us through the majority of today's presentation. My name is Scott Dill. I'm on the business development team here and just wanted to walk you through a little bit about Real Story Group, who we are and what we do. I do see a number of new folks on the line, so thank you for taking some time out of your day to join us. And for some subscribers on the line, welcome back. Great to see you as well. As always, this webinar will be available in your subscriber library within the next couple of days. And then for all of the attendees today, you will be able to access the slides from today's presentation. So typically it's about 48 hours until those get posted on our site. So keep an eye out for that. Also, if you have questions, enter those into the questions tab in the GoToWebinar control panel. And if we don't get to those at the end of today's session, we can certainly follow up with you after the webinar today. Just a little bit about Real Story Group and who we are. As a company, we've been at this for over 20 years now. And what I can tell you is we're an analyst firm in the sense of, you may be familiar with some of the bigger names that are out there, like the Gartners and Forresters of the world. But what's different about Real Story Group and the approach that we take is that we never work for or advise the vendors that we cover in any way. And so our only focus is on technology, users, and buyers, and helping you find solutions that are the right fits for what it is that you're looking to do. So from us, you're not going to see, hey, here's the top 10 DAM vendors, or here's the 10 worst, but it's rather, what are your use cases? What problems are you trying to solve? And how can we help you solve those challenges through the research and advice that we provide? So Jeff, if you want to get to the next slide real quick. We can share a little bit more about that. It's not actually moving. Jarrod, if you can change that.
Give me 1 second here.
Sure.
Sorry about that.
Not a problem.
Well, it is a problem if I can't share my screen. Let's see. How are we now?
Great. So today we're going to focus on digital asset management, which is the purple line in this map here of the different technology areas that we cover. But you'll notice that we also evaluate these vendors in a number of other different marketplaces: web content management, customer data platforms, journey orchestration engines, etc. So you can either come to us if you're looking at, say, okay, we're looking at a new DAM vendor. Here's where our incumbent provider is and what are their strengths and weaknesses versus some marketplace alternatives. But if you're also taking more of a holistic look at your stack and how DAM fits into the bigger picture, that's also something we can help you out with. As today we'll talk about not just DAM, but how that evolution is taking place as you move towards omni-channel content management. As I mentioned earlier, our primary focus is on you as a technology user and buyer. So we take a pull no punches approach in talking to you about what the vendors do well, but also where they could fall short for you, and making sure you're getting the product that's the best fits for your needs. So we don't ever speak at vendor events or advise them on their strategy in any way, which allows us to really share with you the real story, hence the where the name comes from. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Jarrod to take us through the rest of today's presentation. Jarrod?
Great. Thank you, Scott, and thank you all for taking a few minutes. We appreciate it as always. And as Scott mentioned, we've had the luxury of working with many clients, about a little over 4,000 by last count, over 60 different countries over the last 20 years. So we get brought in to projects at various stages. And so I thought I'd share with you today one of the lenses that we use to kind of evaluate where someone is on their journey. and particularly around DAM, but we do this for all the technologies that we're looking at. We want to understand, where everyone is on their journey of advancement. And the fact of the matter is, everyone's at a different stage. No two organizations are exactly at the same stage. So I wanted to introduce this framework. We used a pretty normal 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, and dare I say, maybe even a 4.0 framework. But this is the first lens that I like to say when we start our conversations with a new client. All right, where are you today? Let's plot you on a 1, 2, or 3, or 4 step in the journey, and then let's look at this framework to brainstorm how we can get to the next step. Or how we can get to the next few steps for those of you looking really far in advance. So I think it's always helpful to have a common framework, so we're having these conversations in a real meaningful way. So let's talk about what each steps of this framework are. And the 1.0 framework that or step in the framework is something that we call a standalone library. But before we get to the 1.0, we have to be realistic here, and we'll be realistic in just saying that many organizations that we talk to are not even at a 1.0 phase just yet. They're still in a 0 point something phase. And what does that look like? Well, those are the organizations that have assets and content scattered across their organization. There's assets on desktops and laptops and tablets and phones and email, in chat systems, in file shares. Many of you tell me that we have so many assets in our DEF, XYZ drives. Obviously, SharePoint and other document management systems and collaboration tools are guilty of housing so much content and assets and data within all of these things. And of course, there's a bunch of applications out there, custom applications and purchase applications that house content and data. And of course, the cloud. The cloud has solved a lot of our problems, but for many of our organizations that we speak to, the cloud is a catch-all. It's the place where we just throw everything. It's how we share assets. When every time we share, we create a duplicate. And so I think, if you could paint a picture of many of our organizations, it might look like something like this, where we can't even say we're at a truly at a 1.0 phase of managing content, but we really have content all over the place. And so a goal of 1.0, for those of us in that scattered 0 point something phase, is can we stand up a system to properly secure, store, organize, and retrieve content throughout a life cycle? And for many of you, this might be your first digital asset management system. For others, there's other content management systems that might be playing this role for you, but you're able to manage content fully through a life cycle. It's a single place where people can go and pull content from in order to use it. However, one caveat here, and I didn't just single out digital asset management there for a reason, because I think what we've seen happen for many 1.0 organizations is that you've stood up technologies and the teams that support those technologies in a way that really gears them to content types. So for some of you, you set up your first digital asset management system to house all your video, audio, and image files. Maybe your InDesign and Photoshop and Illustrator files as well. But aside from that, you have a document management tool that houses your Word docs and your PDFs and your PowerPoints. Some of you have really bloated web content management systems that have tons of content that's just suited for a single channel, that is the web, and other systems like marketing tools and marketing automation tools and social publishing tools hold those channel specific content as well. So even though we might be at a 1.0 phase, we still might be in a fairly siloed organization. So just to reiterate, standalone library is certainly a step up from the 0 point something world. It's certainly a step up from having stuff scattered around a bunch of shared or cloud shared drives or cloud sharing platforms. But in a typical 1.0 world, that system, that library is standalone from the rest of the environment. It's disconnected from the larger technical stack. So what we create is another destination to go put something, and then when you need it, another destination where you go pull it from and then put it somewhere else. So again, a step up, better, but not really where most of us want to go. Phase 2 is something we call content management as a MARTECH service. So here, I'll take you back to the 2010s, where many of us in the digital asset management space were at conferences screaming at the top of our lungs, DAM should be considered MARTECH, right? Where in the past it was simply a tool of the librarians in many organizations, but we were saying DAM needs to be considered a true part of your MARTECH stack. And so a lot of really smart organizations, we think, took that to heart and started to do some horizontal integration. So they use their DAM to power their web content management tool, or their DAM to power their marketing automation tool, or DAM to power their social publishing tool, which is a real nice step in the right direction, right? So, but there was a lot of point-to-point integrations here that made this happen. So if we were to kind of give you some characteristics of a DAM as a MARTECH service, it's certainly recognized as part of your MARTECH ecosystem. It's part of your MARTECH stack. In many cases, it's a critical part of the workflow, where assets truly come from that single source and get passed to other systems where people work. The people in the creating those web experiences are not just pulling from their web content management system in the 2.0 world. Those, when they pull assets, they're actually pulling them from the DAM. That's a big critical part of that workflow. 2.0 organizations are characterized by downstream integrations, like I mentioned, from the DAM out to web, out to social, out to other channels. But in many organizations, there's also an implied upstream integration as well. So think about integrations from your creative suite of tools, your Photoshops, your InDesign, creative operations workflow tools. Those systems, as things get approved, get put into the DAM at various stages, and then ultimately live in that DAM to be pushed out to future endpoints. But as when I talk about upstream and downstream integrations, you might recognize here that we're really talking about a one-way flow of information. Content is moving from upstream into the DAM to the downstream to out to the world. There's very little, if any, information coming back. And that's a key point that will really move us into the next phase, 3.0, which we call our Omnichannel content platform. So when we talk about Omnichannel content, I want you to think bigger. So I want you to think bigger than just the traditional definition of digital assets. So if you think about traditional definition, you're talking about managing rich media and brand assets in the form of images, video, and audio. Many of you might have already started to delve into some other document types, but for the most part, when we talk about DAM, that's the core of what we're talking about. What I want to challenge you all is when I challenge you to think bigger, think about omni-channel. What if we could give the people creating experiences for all these different various touch points, some of which we know and some of which we don't even know of the future? What if we could start managing our content in a way that gave the people creating those experiences the building blocks they need to create those experiences? And so I wanted to challenge you a little bit to think about, how do you manage your snippet of text next to an image or a video? How do you manage an offer as a discrete asset? How do you manage something like a micro experience, which might be a combination of text copy, images, even code of some sort? Can you manage that as a discrete content type? So it's a little bit different way of thinking, but I think if there's a common theme, text, data, and the traditional digital assets are getting closer together. People are saying, I need to be able to manage these in a meaningful way so that I can give my experience creators the building blocks they need to create these experiences. I'm not necessarily saying that this needs to be one single system to do that. I can tell you there's a bunch of vendors who want you to put it into one single system. It might be a combination of systems before we get there, but for some organizations, some of you among us, you will be okay with one system. For others, you might have to we might be talking about an integration story here that makes a lot of sense. So if we can kind of draw this out in a way, if you think about whatever combination of systems or single systems that you put into place, what you're doing is you're creating a platform of which to draw upon to deliver to your engagement services. So now you're thinking about reusable and trackable content, assets, product components from a single source, powering your customer loyalty systems, your sales and support systems, your social media systems, your outbound marketing systems, your web content management systems, and your e-commerce systems potentially, right? And one of the phenomenons we've seen from organizations that have taken this leap to this 3.0 world is that as they push more content and by extension, more data and more decision logic out of these engagement services and into this omni-channel content platform, kind of the nice thing that we've seen is that these engagement services have started to thin, right? People are realizing, hey, maybe we don't need to spend this X number of millions of dollars into this web content management behemoth of our past. Maybe we can thin out that technology and invest in really more of our foundation layer so that we're able to get smarter around and not be tied specifically to the endpoints, to the end channels that we're trying to reach. So it's been a real shift here where we've seen, again, this is happening for content, for data, for decisions coming out of these channel specific systems into a platform that can truly be that single source to power these systems. And why is this so relevant to the DAM world? Well, there's a lot of vendors trying to be that omni-channel content platform, and this is just this slide just gives you a representative few, if you will. So there's a bunch of web content management vendors, particularly on the headless side of the world, who want to become your omni-channel content platforms. There's marketing operations tools that want to be your omni-channel content platforms. There's component content management systems, there's CRM systems, there's PIM systems, there's a whole slew of vendors who recognize this as their way to find their way into your foundation layer of your stack. And I don't know who's going to win this in the long run, but from where we sit today, we think that the DAM vendors at least have a head start. I think that they have solved the bigger challenge of how to support rich media, images, and video for that matter. They figured that out. And I think for them to solve the text problem and the data problem, it's an easier solve than the vendors who are going in the other direction. I think at the top end of the market, we've seen a lot of DAM vendors build their solutions to scale to large volumes of content just because of the nature of rich media. And I think that gives them a head start over some of these other markets. And as some of you might know, under the hood of some of the DAM systems, there's some not all of DAM systems have some pretty sophisticated architectures, that support some compound relationships between assets, allowing for parent-child relations and sibling relationships, and even in some cases, some really complicated ontologies of relationships between assets and entities for that matter. And I think that's really important and again, a key characteristic of why I think DAM vendors have a head start over all of these. Now, that's a generalization. There's some vendors in some of these markets who are closer to finding a solution than others, but in general, I think the DAM world has a little bit of a head start here. So let's summarize the 3.0 world. So any omni-channel content platform will have to manage media, narrative, and data all as first-class objects, right? You can't have one of those winning out and have the others be subservient to them. They all have to be first-class objects. And if you think about the ramifications of what does that mean for a search query, how do you return a search that has data and content and images and videos in a meaningful way for a user? I don't have an answer for that, but there is a way to treat them all as all first-class objects and cater to all those different types. You need to be able to support for component level management, and you need to be able to support this notion of compound mixed media content. It isn't just enough, I don't think, to manage things as discrete just images, just video, or just text. In some cases, text and images and video need to be married up to create some meaningful experiences and managed in a system to support that. I think one of the biggest things that I see clients trying to solve as in the 3.0 world is getting out of that one-way flow of information and introducing this concept of a two-way flow of information. So we all know, in every one of our organizations, we all have a lot of analytics data. You know, it's easy to measure these days. However, what's not easy is to use that data in a meaningful way to impact future decisions. So I think the smarter 3.0 customers and enterprises out there are round tripping that data back into this content platform and having that data live side by side with the asset, so that for those people who are going to use that content in the future to create future experiences, can learn from that content, learn from those analytics to inform future decisions, right? So that they don't have to guess about which asset's going to perform better. They have the data to support it right within that single system. Now, this is an area where we're starting to get into, you know, there are not a ton of enterprises who are doing this well. There are not a ton of vendors out there who are providing the capabilities that are out there, but I can tell you the buyers want this and the vendors are trying to get this and do this in a meaningful way. So this is a very real phenomenon that's getting closer, but we're not quite there yet. Speaking of not quite there yet, let's talk about a 4.0 world, something that we're calling predictive content platform. And I can just hand up my examples here are going to be very rudimentary, just because I don't see it being done exceptionally well in a lot of cases. But I want to introduce some themes of a 4.0 predictive content world. So the first is around this concept of a never finished asset, right? And this gets back to that notion of compound assets, you know, base content pieces, and then different versions of that as text and content, and get layered on top of each other and associated with each other. But a big use case is personalization, and particularly personalization at scale. Like thinking about, can we manage this base asset and then really hyper personalize across the globe based on data, based on things like location and other factors that we know about people in their journey, and, you know, logic that we've built into to delivering some real personalized experiences. Can we manage both the core asset and maybe derivatives of that asset in real meaningful way, so that we can record over time, you know, what's working and what's not? Another kind of extension of that never finished asset theme is this notion of real-time manipulation. You know, this is a very basic example where you provide an offer to someone in real time, but doing this at scale, you know, globally, where you can have a similar offer or variations of different offers running across the globe, but very much targeted to that region, to that cohort of people that you're trying to reach. I think that's a very powerful thing, and doing that real time, you know, requires that having a system that can manage these assets in a way that can do that. What I'm really excited about when I talk about this predictive content platform is this notion of truly predicting performance. You know, even something as simple as, you know, instead of us guessing about which content or assets are going to perform better, what if we could actively query the systems that we use? What if we could query this platform where our content lived and say, hey, I'm trying to reach women in the Northeast in the summertime from the ages of 30 to 50 who are looking to take their families on vacation. Which asset's going to perform better? You know, are they more likely to take a desert vacation, or they're more likely to visit a cooler climate? You know, these are questions that we can, in theory, ask our content platforms and have them bubble up an answer, so that we can make some decisions based on some real data and some real past performance. Likewise, we're all drowning in data, and content for that matter. So I think having a system help us make decisions is a real exciting piece of the puzzle here is when we think about a 4.0 world. So instead of the traditional notion of going to a system and querying it in some way, looking for an asset that we know exists, or browsing through assets to find one that we didn't necessarily know exists, what if we could have a system that bubbled up content to us and said, hey, based on this time of year and based on these world events that are happening or micro events that are happening that are relevant to our industry, what if we could bubble up content that the systems, when it marries up the data with the content, it says this is likely to perform. What if we could bubble up that so that we sped up the time to market? I just think that that's something that I know that vendors are thinking about, and I know that buyers are thinking about it as well, but we're not quite there yet. So let's talk about this again and to summarize. So leverage analytics to suggest better performing assets. Let's facilitate personalization at scale. Let's have a system that we can query to be able to answer some context questions. I think thinking about real-time content performance testing gets facilitated by a system that can be manipulated on the fly. And then think about maybe the furthest future case that I can think of here is, what about a system that, based on data of actual performance, based on analyzing the content that we have, what if some artificial intelligence algorithm could not only suggest which content that we have will perform better, what if it could in some way create content that it thought could perform better? And I don't think that may seem a little future looking for some of you, but I can tell you for others, they're absolutely thinking about this. They're thinking about how can the system help the creation process based on data and based on content that the base content that we provide, to create new content that engages our constituents in a meaningful way. So this is the spectrum that we use to assess every one of our new clients. We kind of plot you on where we think you are as it relates to content management in your organization. And then we use this to also help create future roadmaps, which I think hopefully this helps many of you as well. Some key takeaways here. This notion of providing omni-channel experiences is really forcing enterprises to rethink not only just content. I focused on that today, but it's affecting how people think of data and decisioning as well. So we're seeing some fundamental changes to the MARTECH stack across nearly all of our clients. I think not only are companies rethinking their stacks, they're thinking about how to staff these things, and as such, there is a variety of brainstorming or trial and error, if you will, on what organizational models are best suited to support these kind of things that we're thinking about. So getting out of this notion of teams focused on a specific channel, but how can we provide a content as a service to our organizations, as a foundational service to our organization that isn't tied to a channel. It's a very different model that organizations are changing their org structures to support. Everyone's on a different stage. I think it's really important to think about that. Despite what some software vendors are telling you, there's no single right answer. That you can't just buy a solution to this that will solve everything. I think most of the organizations that are being successful in the early days of moving along the spectrum are cobbling together the right solutions to create an environment that is right for them. And as always, we recommend, don't just take our word for it. Don't take a vendor's word for it, certainly, but put a vendor through its tests, through its paces, and really test them as to their suitability to your needs. And so we recommend applying design thinking methodologies, making the demos and the proof of concepts as real as possible so that you get a true sense of what it's like to work with these guys, what it's like to work with the technologies as well, what it's like to work with third-party partners, and that'll really suss out the key risk factors that I think you need to consider as you go through this. One of the big things that we're seeing quite a bit, as you might suspect, when we get called in and at various stages of that journey, is oftentimes we come to the realization that the technology is holding some organizations back from advancing along that spectrum. It's just the fact of the matter. I mentioned that why I think DAM as an industry is better suited to kind of get to where we're all going. They have a head start, but that's not true across the board. Some DAM vendors are a little bit further than others in certain cases. So if your ambitions are to really push the envelope and jump up these different phases, you might hit a wall with some of your vendors, and we're seeing that quite a bit. And it's funny, just talking to some colleagues of mine recently, we were all commenting about how no one seems happy with their current dam at the moment, and they want to. And I think this is part of the problem. You know, a lot of people got into the dam when they were at a 1.0 world or even a 2.0 world, but when they want to make the leap to 3, they might need to reconsider and look at the marketplace. But good news, there's lots of options out there to consider, and if you need help with that, you know, figuring out where you want to go next on your journey, just let us know, and we'll try to make it as smooth a road as possible. So thank you all so much, as always, for your time. If anyone wants to keep this conversation going, feel free to contact me, my email, or on LinkedIn or Twitter or whatnot. And if anyone wants to get a sample of the research that we're doing, you know, feel free to go to realstorygroup.com and download a sample. But with that, I'll leave you, and I hope everyone has a great rest of your day, and we'll talk soon. Thank you.